Hello and welcome to The Pulse with me, Araba Kumson. Our headlines this hour: Parliament uniting condemning former Deputy Trade Minister for flouting COVID-19 safety protocols, but divided in their views to prosecute him. Government says the lack of money has held back the implementation of the Right to Information law. And another top doctor has died of COVID-19 complications some weeks after the medical director of the Kwadaso SDA government hospital succumbed to the disease. We are live on your DSTV channel 421, GoTV channel 144, and live on your digital terrestrial TV because we are free to air. Stay with us.
The Pulse is brought to you by
Stop Cough from Ernest Chemists.
Thanks for staying with us. Now, opinions are divided over calls for the Deputy Trade Minister, Carlos Kingsley Ahinkara, to be prosecuted after he resigned for breaching COVID-19 protocols. As you may know, the Deputy Minister, who tested positive for COVID-19, has admitted he was recently at the Kolebu Teaching Hospital for a review of his status. But many Ghanaians were angered when a video emerged showing the minister interacting closely with people at a registration center. Watch. Well, the minister, in an interview granted to host of Ekosi saying on Asempa FM, Philip Osei-Bonsu, justified his actions.
In your case, no, so Enra na omode wo ba Kolebu hono meboa.
Enra, yeah.
Okay, but I've seen pictures on social media say you were, monitoring registration exercise now some registration centers. Is that true?
That was that started the following day.
Yeah, that's Tuesday, right? And
yeah, started Tuesday.
Yeah, most started Tuesday to Wednesday.
Wednesday.
That's Enra.
Enra Wednesday.
Yeah, Enra was Wednesday.
And then Tuesday, no.
Okay.
And then Tuesday, I decided to just pass through and see how some of the centers were operating.
But at the time, no, you knew your test results. So what tested positive? Remember?
Oh yes, of course. But it didn't mean that I couldn't go out because by that time my test result was last week. So, and after 1 week or so, no, according to my health directors, I could step out.
Asymptomatic.
Be careful with my nose mask and social distancing, and not touch anybody and so on.
And are you very certain, say, in the process no one touch you be I am very,
very certain about that one. Very certain. So what pictures look like over social media and you will see that even in speaking, my hands were folded in front of me. I was standing way away, even I was wearing my nose mask. I was standing way away from the people that I was talking to and so on.
Okay, so wouldn't you consider the decision to step out, as being reckless, knowing how contagious Yariwe ete?
I wouldn't say that because we say we are not in normal situation, and we are not in normal times now. We only have to manage ourselves in a way and think and so forth. So, but I don't see in another way. Because of the conditions, I won't step out, and I say I won't give people that kind of appearance. We have one that now empty one. Ebiane say Enra
Asymptomatic FM.
Say don't see me by here. Me hospital me. The difference of the time was this no cross spread more than me for outside him. But I can assure you that I'm a very careful person, and I was very, very mature about it.
I've seen other videos, and so when your victory was declared by the Electoral Commission at more primaries, hugging some of your supporters and all of that. At the time, now who status the same?
So the videos you see there are 2018 videos. And friends that day the video.
But on the day of the primaries, you had tested positive.
On the day of the primaries, not there be not
a friend on Asymptomatic FM.
No results, no my.
No results.
But no, my be fast samples, no.
The fast samples the following day, which is Monday.
Oh, which is Monday.
Yes.
And would you advise probably the people who were around you at the time, might be your contact? Was it Tracy one?
Oh, they are for information. In fact, I'm the whole couple that started 3 years because some of them started complaining even before
Asymptomatic FM.
In Timimic Municipal Health Directorate. I'm catching on the main only be complaining about some bodily pain and environment, almost 35 300
Wow. That means really that primaries might have led to the spread, maybe if not just your constituency, other constituencies and so.
That would be very speculative because primaries, maybe be Ghana, and it could still happen that some of the constituencies near ABSC or ABSC or baby, and then have to be into me MPC now.
Yeah.
And see, when we generalize like that, I will be making a mistake.
Well, public pressure mounted on him from all quarters, civil society organizations and the Ghana Medical Association asking that he resigns or gets fired. There was social media storm with many demanding he be fired and prosecuted. Here are a few of the tweets from Twitter users. Now, one says, Carlos Ahinkura resigning is never enough. He should be sanctioned as well. He is using the resignation as a cover-up. Open your eyes and stop praising him for resigning. Such dishonorable act. The sort of leaders we have in this country. Sigh. Hashtag Carlos must resign. Also, Frederick Brook at Poet Brooks writes, it shouldn't end at just resignation. Carlos Ahinkura must be prosecuted duly. The resignation is an appeasement to his office. Now let's get to court. Some pastors have been prosecuted already in breaching these protocols. Carlos is indifferent. Hashtag Carlos must resign. Hashtag fire Carlos. Pakwesi at Wala Sikai says, the way Ghanaians put politics aside and spoke with a united front against Carlos Ahinkura's careless behavior, if we start doing that to our political leaders and demand accountability and the best with a united front, I think we shall see change. Now, well, shortly afterwards, it emerged the deputy minister had tendered in his resignation to the president. The presidency earlier in the day issued a statement indicating that the president has accepted his resignation. And it reads, the President of the Republic, Nana Addo Dankwa Akufo-Addo, on Friday, 3rd July 2020, accepted the resignation from office of the Deputy Minister for Trade and Industry, Honorable Carlos Kingsley Ahinkura, MP, which takes immediate effect. This follows the admission by the Deputy Minister of his breach of the COVID-19 protocols. In accepting the resignation, the president recognizes that the Honorable Carlos Ahinkura has acted honorably in the circumstances by resigning his office and wishes him well. But pressure group Occupy Ghana, however, says the resignation is not enough. The group wants the former deputy minister arrested and prosecuted. Jejom Segbefia is a member of the group.
So there's a lot of actions on his part that is a blatant disregard for the law. So whilst we applaud his resignation, we think that we need to go further by prosecuting him. After all, recently, we were all having a conversation concerning whether a person in his own car alone should wear a mask or not. And we were made to understand that that person could go to jail for 10 years. Who was the law made for? The person living in Asymptomatic or the MP is exempt from the law? So we think we need to go do one further, send a message to people that we don't want to hang around with COVID-19. What we are saying is that what he does breaks laws. And that if this is a party that believes in the rule of law, and you have a person who has on 3 occasions disregarded that law, cast his despite into the teeth of a president that for 13 times has been trying to assure Ghanaians that he's on top of this issue of the pandemic, then you can't allow him to stand. So we are inviting the New Patriotic Party to consider that, withdraw his candidature, and perhaps replace him. Because a person who does this, knowing full well that he's biologically at risk, and still does that, goes into the constituency in a place where there's a lot of people, clearly has no regard for the law that he says he will be representing when he goes into parliament. So I beg to differ with the good professor.
Well, not everyone agrees. Political scientist at the KNUST, Dr. Amache Boateng, says these calls are absurd.
The first president of the land, Nkrumah, was in prison when people voted for him. And then the governor of the day, released him, and from the prison he came to, lead the country. The action of getting someone to represent a constituency is taken by the constituents. And the moment you have a popularly elected person, it becomes very difficult for any other, group of people who are not part of the constituency to be able to take action. So the people who are making the call, who are they referring to and why? Are they in a way suggesting that the whole constituency go into some sort of a referendum or something to take such a decision? Who is to take that decision? So politically, it sounds a little absurd, actually, because the decision, the decision makers themselves are not complaining. So you and I sitting outside here cannot really, cry for them. So I think that particular call is a little absurd, actually. If you come from the delegates in the constituency, and if the delegates collectively are to take a decision, then we are suggesting we go into some sort of a referendum there, some sort of such an arrangement to let them express their position on the issue. Maybe that is what the call is for. In the absence of that, I really don't get it.
Well, Eugene Ahin, who is Director of Communications at the Presidency, says a decision is yet to be taken as to whether the former Deputy Minister should be prosecuted.
For the President, the most important thing is the fact that the Deputy Minister has recognized the fact that, as I said, what transpired was not the best. And as a result of that, instead of waiting for him to be fired, he has come on his own to tender in his resignation. And the President believes what he has done, at least he's acted honorably in the circumstances. And as a result of that, has accepted his resignation from office.
Is it true that the President offered him the option of resigning or being fired?
The President simply accepted his resignation. I don't think, I don't know where you're getting this thing from as to whether the President gave him 2 options. No, to the best of my knowledge, the letter came in early this morning. The President took delivery of the letter, and the President duly accepted his resignation from office.
Is the President going to call for the prosecution of Mr. Hinkra for committing this crime?
Well, I'll say when we get to that bridge, we'll cross it.
Are we not there? Are we not at the bridge?
Well, yeah, but at this point, I don't have any information to that end. So that's what I'm saying. When we get to that bridge, we'll cross it.
And we'll be speaking to Dr. Michael Owusu of KCCR, that's the Kumasi Center for Collaborative Research, for more on this. But in Parliament today, the NDC MP for Central Tong, Alexander Roosevelt Otoje, has also added his voice to calls for the immediate prosecution of his colleague and Member of Parliament for Tema West, Carlos Ahinkra, for breaching the COVID-19 protocols. According according to him, the resignation by the deputy minister is not enough, adding that the law should take its course.
Let me point it out here that it was very disastrous on his part. This is a disease that they've been using billions of cedis to cure. And you know that if you contract the disease and you get closer to others, they also contract it. Why did you go? It means he wanted Ghana to spend so much, or he wanted Ghanaians to be wiped out. That is the reason, and it is too bad. It's not right. Having known a member of parliament, a minister of state, having known that I have contracted a disease, I'm positive, and I've decided to go and mingle with people, it was below the belt.
He has resigned. That should be enough, isn't it?
That alone is even not. If there should be anything beyond resignation, he should do it, because it's not the right thing to do. If there should be anything beyond resignation, he should be seen to be done.
Like what?
Oh,
support the call for prosecution or arrest the prosecution?
that is okay, because if you infect one person, it has a multiplier effect, and that is disastrous to not only to the economy of Ghana, but to the social life of Ghanaians. You understand? So if you should be seen infecting one person now, as we speak, it could be about 1,000 people we infected. So they should go ahead and prosecute him. Resigning alone is not enough. Yes.
Thank you.
Well, Minister of Communications Eslo Owusu-Ekufo described Carlos Ahinkra's conduct as unfortunate. However, she disagrees with calls for his prosecution. Madam Owusu-Ekufo argued that it will be difficult to establish that the MP spread the virus during his tour of the constituency. She asked those demanding for his prosecution to rather appreciate and commend him for his gesture.
It is imperative that you self-isolate. And if you don't do that, then it means you may unwittingly be spreading the virus. Yes, you will take all the necessary precautions, but you never know what may happen. So I think it is most unfortunate that in the heat of the moment, Carlos felt compelled to go out there and monitor the registration process. He says he took all the necessary precautions, but it was incumbent on him to have been in isolation while he was still actively fighting the virus. So my heart really goes out to him. He's excellent material in the ministry. He will be missed, but we must respect him and applaud him for doing the honorable thing once he realized that, no, we are part of a government that is preaching in this country to have people acknowledging that what they did was wrong, and so they would lay their position down, they would resign to take responsibility for it. Others would have been defending the indefensible, and I don't think that is the right way.
Some have asked for him to be prosecuted. To be specific, let's talk about the General Secretary of the NDC. He's just addressed the media and he's calling for Carlos Ahinkra's prosecution.
Prosecution for what?
For spreading COVID-19 unknowingly, albeit.
Unless you can show that a particular individual contracted the virus by coming into contact with him because he went out on the monitoring, it will be difficult to establish a case for spreading COVID-19 unwillingly. So let's not rush to tread into areas where we may, it's easy to say, but would you have the evidence to prosecute? That's another thing at all. I think that if it is punishment we want, he has laid down his position as deputy minister to take responsibility for it. You don't beat a dead horse. What else would you be achieving by his prosecution? I think if he had insisted that he hadn't done anything wrong, and so he was still going to defend his actions, then the call for further sanctions to be applied would be in order. He has admitted that what he did was not proper, and he has resigned to take responsibility for it. I think we can use that as a lesson for all of us, that sometimes you may, in the heat of the moment, do things that you regret. But once they pointed out to you that what you did was wrong, the noble thing to do is to take responsibility for it, and then go further and say that in my position as minister, I flouted the rules. It is this government which is seeking to enforce the protocol, so his position is untenable.
Meanwhile, a member of Ghana's COVID-19 ICU team Dr. Fortune Biekro says infected persons have no business stepping out.
So we all know that, we've been preaching social distancing. If you know you are infected, self-isolation. And it's the same government in which he is that has spent so much money isolating people who are infected and also people who come from abroad. We quarantine them for some time. So then, this cannot be overemphasized, that if you know you are infected, the best thing to do is to get isolated. There is no excuse to give. There's no reason why you should step out to, especially where there is a crowd. I don't know what is important, so important at the registration center that he has to go. He could have sent somebody, so it's not the best at all. It is never the best. So I will encourage other people. It is not a good example to follow. It is not. If you know you are infected, get to an isolation center. If you are not being taken to isolation center, as much as possible, isolate yourself at home. You are putting other people at risk when you go out there. It's not a good thing to do. So please, this explanation does not hold water. It is not. There's no explanation for the reason why you will step out when you know very well you are infected. So I don't think his explanation is acceptable. So nobody should follow his example. If you are infected, get to an isolation center. Or if you can isolate yourself at home, isolate yourself at home. Do not step out.
Now, another top doctor has died of COVID-19 complications some weeks after the medical director of the Kwadaso SDA government hospital succumbed to the disease. The latest victim, Dr. Richard Casilla, until his death, was a consultant surgeon at the Trust Hospital here in Accra. Meanwhile, the Ghana Medical Association has raised concerns over the increasing number of its members who are being infected by the disease. We'll be hearing from them, but first, here's a statement from the Trust Hospital on the death of the consultant surgeon. We regret to inform all staff of the passing of our consultant surgeon, Dr. Richard Casilla. The sad event occurred on Thursday, 2nd of July 2020 at the University of Ghana Medical Center, where he was receiving treatment for COVID-19 complications. May his soul rest in perfect peace. Now, many doctors understudy the accomplished consultant surgeon. One of his mentees is the head of the urology unit at the Komfo-Anokye Teaching Hospital, Dr. Roland Azoliade. He's been eulogizing him.
I really consider myself a classic example of Dr. Kise's great contribution to Ghana's health sector. 15 years ago, as a young surgical trainee under Dr. Kise at the Kuforido Regional Hospital, he held my hand. He did not only teach me how to operate as a surgeon, but he taught me how to live my life as a doctor. Dr. Kise believed being a doctor is one of the highest calling to serve humanity. He had been with me and encouraged me throughout all the difficult stages of surgical training till I qualified as a senior specialist surgeon. Personally, I have lost a giant whose shoulder I stand today. Ghana has lost a surgical giant in the person of Dr. Richard Kise, a man whose passion was to alleviate the suffering of humanity. Dr. Kise's life was all about the welfare of his patients. Indeed, a good man is gone home, sadly. May God console his wife, the kids, and the family.
I'm Arbor Kunsin, and you're watching The Pulse here on the Joy News channel. We're taking a short breather, but we're back with more stories. You're welcome back. This is The Pulse. I'm Arbor Kunsin, sitting in for your regular host, Gifty Ando Apia. Let's return to the issue of COVID affecting medical experts. Now, General Secretary of the Ghana Medical Association, Dr. Titus Bayo, earlier revealed that the number of doctors affected have increased. Now, we're joined on the line by Dr. Michael Owusu of the Kumasi Center for Collaborative Research. Doc, many thanks for your time. We've been taking a lot of your time this week, but of course, this is an important discussion, so we need to have you in it. So I'm sure you've heard a lot of your colleagues talking about the fact that a lot of their friends are being infected by this virus. They've been exposed to it because most often they run out of PPEs and they are forced to give it to the patients at the risk of exposing themselves to the virus. How does this make you feel from where you stand as an expert, on this matter?
Yes, so this is quite disturbing, and this also has happened across different countries, and especially with a virus that is highly contagious like COVID. This SARS-2 coronavirus. And if you look across the African countries, over 6,000 health workers have been infected, and quite a significant number of people have died. If you follow through this virus from China, through Italy, through the United States, and in Brazil, quite a number of health workers are the people who seem to be at the edge when it comes to becoming infected and also succumbing to the virus. So, it's a difficult thing, and which will mean that anytime people behave in certain ways, they put the health workers' life at risk. Not only clinicians or doctors who are working on patients, but it spans across pharmacists who also handle drugs from patients who come to them, to nurses who support on the ward, to laboratory personnel who handle the samples and process, even to the cleaners. Those who clean the wards, the floor with disinfectants are also at risk. Those who carry the bodies, when people die, also are at risk. And almost every sector, even the record keepers, those who record patients' vital information, are also at risk. So because this virus is highly, highly contagious, so when one or two people get into the ward with this virus, there is a high chance that many people who come into contact with the virus will become infected. This is quite difficult, and which will mean that we have to do our best to ensure that we all adhere to the precautionary measures, and then also not act in a way not to expose many people to this virus.
Right. Now, I'd like us to focus the conversation on people who are asymptomatic, because we've seen, especially just recently with the Carlos Ahinkra case. Mr. Ahinkra says that, yes, he was tested positive, but he was taking his medication, so he felt that he wasn't going to infect anybody, which is why he went out into the crowd and was interacting with people. But generally, people who are asymptomatic feel that they cannot pass on the virus to others. Is this true?
No, so this is not entirely true. And I think this seems to be breeding a lot of confusion, especially when we had the new discharge criteria, which said that if you're asymptomatic and you are positive, after 14 days, you can de-isolate or discharge the patient, which doesn't mean that those people are free. There are studies across the world, although there is no systematic study or meta-review analysis of these findings. Many studies across seem to point to the fact that asymptomatics contribute significantly to the transmission of infection. So there are two groups of the asymptomatic. Asymptomatic means that you don't have the disease or you don't have the symptoms. You may have the virus, but you may not be manifesting the symptoms of the virus. So we have what we call pre-symptomatic groups. So they don't have the signs and symptoms, but then they have the virus. It's only a matter of time. After 2 or 3 days, they begin to show the symptoms. And then we have the post-symptomatic groups. So these people are, after the symptoms, they also, will recover and then will feel free. And we have the pure asymptomatics. So these are people that throughout the period of infection, you never see anything in them. So some studies have found out that, for you to be able to transmit the virus to another person, you must have a high load of the virus in you to be able to transmit to somebody. So there seems not to be a difference in the load of the virus in asymptomatics compared to symptomatic populations. So that is one of the things that scientifically we know very well about. And there are two main studies that has shaped the world of science when it comes to understanding asymptomatic transmission of the virus. The first one is what was reported in early days in Italy, in where we call the VO city. They were able to enroll about 2,812 asymptomatic people, and out of them, 41% of them became positive for the virus. And then they followed the contact of these people, for a certain time, more than 14 days. And they realized that although they were asymptomatic, quite a number of them were able to transmit the virus to other people. So this is one of the first evidence that we got, apart from the one that happened in Asia due to the SARS-1 virus. The other one was from the US. Those crew members on the US Roosevelt Tudori crew, where they had about 4,954 crew members who were part of a whole, moving through their crew system. But then 70% of them who were asymptomatic. Later on, when they came down and they were followed up, they realized that those people who were positive, as part of the crew members, were able to transmit to other people who also get the infection. So when these findings were made available, the European Centers for Disease Control had to amend their protocol and said that they will encourage all health workers to put on a nose mask, and will also encourage the general public to also put on a face mask, because putting on face masks and nose masks will decrease the transmission across the country. In Asia, they also made it mandatory, because of findings from China that anybody who goes out should put on this kind of face mask, because we cannot tell whether you are symptomatic or pre-symptomatic. There is a chance that you can transmit. And because you cannot measure this risk, you are better off taking precautionary measures so that you don't transmit the virus to others. So this is what we know. And although it is not a systematic review, the evidence is quite heavy. That is why many countries will advise that everybody should put on face masks or nose masks, because once you do that, you have a chance of cutting down the virus growth significantly, and you can reduce the virus spread and then protect the lives of the vulnerable in the societies and communities.
Right. Of course, we'll be exploring the perspective, the legal perspective of people who go out there to deliberately infect others, and what the sanctions that they face. We'll be speaking to a legal practitioner, Francis Xavier, who will join us on Zoom shortly. But Doc is still with us. So, asymptomatics, what is the protocol? Because I've heard people say that their managers say they should continue to come to work because they're strong, they're not exhibiting any symptoms, so they should still come to work and work as normal, go about everything as normal. So what is the protocol when it comes to asymptomatics?
So the protocol for asymptomatics is that after testing, you have to first of all test the people. So if you test yourself, you have to isolate yourself for 14 days. So after 14 days, it's presumed that your likelihood of infecting others will be very negligible. Therefore, you can come back to work. So as soon as anybody, or you go to a facility and you are declared positive for the virus, you have to go under self-isolation, or even to the isolation center for 14 days. And even for that, some advise that even after 14 days, you stay for additional 1 week, making to about 21 days, just to be sure that you don't have any of the viruses around you. And also understand that, you see, if you look at the WHO protocol on de-isolation for asymptomatics, they mentioned that it is unlikely that you will transmit. It doesn't mean you cannot transmit. Your rate of transmission is very low. It is possible you can still transmit when you have a high starting viral load. So it's not completely true that if you are asymptomatic, even after 14 days, you are free. There is still some chance of transmission, but because this is highly negligible, this is why the WHO has gone for this, taking into consideration logistic consideration and many other things that you have to put together.
It's interesting,
people speak.
Right. It's interesting you should say that, even though there's the likelihood of infecting others even after 21 days or 14 days, because there are many who return after self-isolation, after the 21 mandatory days, and still are able to contract the disease because they have been exposed to it after self-isolating for so long.
Yes, that is also a possibility, because as we speak now, we don't know the how well people's immune system can protect them from getting the virus in subsequent infection.
Right.
We don't know yet. For the first SARS-1 virus, we know that the immune system, the antibodies can protect you for up to about 2 years. But for this new virus, we don't know yet. So this is why even if you test positive, you have to adhere to all the precautions, put on nose masks until you get a vaccine.
Right.
Until we get a vaccine, we cannot behave anyway and anyhow.
Right.
So if today you are positive and you are discharged after 21 days or after 14 days, it's possible you can be reinfected because you are not too sure whether, one, you have the antibodies against the virus. And even if you have it, for how long will that protect you? Nobody knows. So we are in sort of a difficult situation where the evidence available is not so much to give us confidence to behave in the way we want. We all have to begin to behave very well, adhere to all the precautions, do what is right until we get a vaccine and a cure. This is the only way we can decide to live our normal lives. Until that happens, even if you are positive after 14 days and you go through isolation or whatever, even after that, you must ensure that you follow all the precautions and do what is right so you don't infect your other colleagues at work or anywhere.
Doc, is it possible to still contract the disease if you're asymptomatic, having gone through the self-isolation period, return to your workplace, follow the protocols? Will you still be able to contract the disease even though you follow the protocols, washing hands, wearing the nose mask and the like?
It's unlikely. I mean, it's highly unlikely that you will contract the disease again. But once again, you cannot know. So if you have followed through the WHO protocol, we keep using the word unlikely.
Right.
We don't say it is not possible because we don't have evidence to prove that it is not possible. You can only say it will not happen when you have substantial evidence to support that. So even if you are positive and you have recovered and come back to work and you adhere to all the protocols, you may not be infected, which is very good. But then if you don't adhere to all the protocols and you are exposed once again to somebody who has infection and you don't have the immunity to the virus, you'll be reinfected again. And you can also tell in the second infections how your body will respond again to this. So things are not straight. Ideally, after you test for the PCR positive, after 14 days, you have to perform what we call the antibody test to know whether you have mounted a good immune system to be able to fight subsequent infection, due to exposure to this virus. But then we don't do that in Ghana. We are yet to get access to these kits. So until that comes, you still assume that even if you go through the phase, consider yourself as susceptible and still behave very well. And once you behave well, you put on your mask, you wash your hand well, you do everything you're supposed to do, it is unlikely that you will become infected. We will keep using unlikely because there's a small chance that based on some one or two things, somebody may contract the virus again.
All right, thank you so much for your time. That's Dr. Michael Owusu. He is a virologist at the Kumasi Center for Collaborative Research with that analysis there. Thank you so much for your time. And the advice is that consider yourself as susceptible and follow the safety protocols, and it is unlikely that you will contract the disease. Now let's talk about the legal aspect. We've been talking a lot about the Deputy Trade Minister, Carlos Ahynkra, who has tendered in his resignation after he admitted that he had exposed some people to COVID because he had tested positive for the virus, and there are many calls for his prosecution. We're joined on the line by legal practitioner Francis Xavier for some perspective on this. So tell us, what will be the legal basis to prosecute the minister who's just tendered in his resignation?
Well, thank you, and a very good afternoon to your cherished viewers. In the first place, we are all aware of the protocols that have been adopted under the Restrictions Act enacted by Parliament for purposes of control of spread of COVID. And under this Restriction Act, it's been said that if we fail to live by the restrictions or the various protocols established under the Act, it becomes a criminal offense. And as far as we are concerned, the latest EI, which is EI 164, that criminalized the wearing of or the non-wearing of face masks, did not repeal the earlier EI that requires that we follow all the protocols to lay down for the control of this COVID pandemic. And for that reason, it is entirely possible that Carlos Ahinkra could be subjected to some form of criminal investigation and potential or possible prosecution. It is also important for us to know that under the Criminal and Other Offences Act, particularly with respect to provisions relating to intent, when a person does an act for which, if reasonable care had been taken, it would have occurred to the person that the act that he's committing will contribute to cause an event, he will be deemed to have caused that event. When you look at what Carlos Ahinkra did, going around in public hugging people, which obviously breached the protocols of for the control of this pandemic. And in fact, we are even reading reports that his driver and some others have already contracted the disease, and one person is dead. And all this goes to suggest that it is his recklessness or his negligence or criminal negligence that has led to the death of those other people. That is, if we are able to properly investigate and establish that fact. So I would think that for preliminaries, what we should be looking out for is a criminal investigation into his conduct, so that when we are able to establish the fact that he indeed criminally was negligent, then we can put him out for prosecution.
Well, in as much as many are calling for his prosecution, there are those who are also, rushing to his defense. And the argument that they make is that it will be difficult to prove that he infected anyone. How are you going to prove that he infected anyone?
Well, I mean, we all know how contagious this disease is. So if you are going out and due to your interaction with the people, I mean, and that's why I'm saying that it is not enough to jump to defense now. Even to prosecute, we can't rush in that prosecution. What we need to do is to investigate the fact. So we should be able to investigate all those other people who are alleged to have contracted the disease. Let's find out how they contracted that disease. If his movement going about or going out with a COVID state is what led to the spread of those, let's say, the spread, then we would have established the basis. Don't forget that in criminal prosecutions, the state will have to prove its case beyond reasonable doubt. And when there is any lingering doubt, it's going to inure to the benefit of the accused person. And that is why it would be important that we don't rush the process, but we will take time to properly investigate the matter and then can put him before court. It is very important that the state will show some commitment in this regard, particularly if the state is serious about respect for the protocols and the need for us to abide by the protocols as a way of controlling the spread of the disease. And don't forget that previously there are some people who were alleged to have broken these protocols and were put before court. And I know that some pastors are already serving some jail term as a result of breaching the COVID protocols and then the restrictions law. So it is important that the state itself would take some responsibility in this respect and show that they are serious in fighting this pandemic. But
let's talk about the practicality of it, because a lot of people have, questioned the practicality of it. Again, it comes down to the evidence, being able to establish that he actually did infect anyone. There's so many people around him. We don't know who else has the disease, who might have passed it on. And the disease is airborne anyway. So really, is it practical to say that there is enough evidence to establish that he passed on the virus to others around him who may have died?
I would agree with you about, the doubts that would come out of this kind of evidence, particularly for purposes of prosecution. However, it doesn't, completely exonerate him. And that is why I would call for a thorough investigation into the matter. in the first place, we should be able to investigate when, he got to know of his status. We should be able to investigate his going out, whether going to visit test of. I think that he probably even had the symptoms before their primaries, because the pictures that we are being shown are the pictures of the celebration of his victory after their primaries. So it means that he had this disease and had actually been going out all over the place and interacting with people as though everything was all right when he knew of his status. So it is important that we interrogate this fact. When did he get to know of the disease? Have we done the contact tracing since he got to know of his status, or since he actually confessed that he went round knowing that he had the disease? Can we contact trace all the people that he came in contact with? I believe that if we are serious about investigating this, we should be able to get to the bottom of it, whether we will be able to sustain a criminal charge against him or not. But don't forget that all those people that he had negligently also infested, they may also have some civil claims against him. So I think that it requires a thorough investigation for us to ascertain, whether or not we can sustain a criminal charge against him or not.
All right, lawyer, legal practitioner, Xavier Susu there. Thank you very much for your perspective on this matter. COVID-19 testing capacity of Kumasi Center for Collaborative Research is set to increase with the receipt of mobile laboratory vans. The Ghana Revenue Authority handed the equipment following an arrangement with the German-based GIZ. Nana Senso-Mensah has more in this report.
Until now, results of COVID-19 tests take up to 4 days to be released. The laboratory vans will be able to move to COVID-19 hotspot areas for mandatory and random testing. Scientific Director at KCCR, Professor Odame Phillips, is confident Ghana's COVID-19 fight will improve with 2 mobile vans.
And we are happy that finally the dream has come to pass. We've signed an MOU to be able to provide laboratory services and to take it closer to the patients. With the mobile laboratory, we'll be able to visit hotspots where the disease is and people who have little access to diagnostic testing. This van will be able to reach them so that they don't have to travel all the way to KCCR to have such testing. So I think this is a huge, a big innovation that we are doing, we've put together as a collaboration, and we are hoping that it's going to yield very good fruits, and the fruits will be there for everyone to see. So we are going to hit the ground running immediately after this handing over. We have some ideas of places where testing is limited, and we will reach out to those districts and make testing easily accessible to them. In terms of reporting, we are going to use the normal lines of reporting. We are collaborating with the Ghana Health Service and the Ministry of Health, and we are going to keep up with the work that we are already doing. And I'm sure that as the weeks go by, everyone will see that this collaboration has really been worthwhile.
Approach to controlling the pandemic is testing, tracing, and treatment. Pooling available resources to combat COVID-19 is the way to go. JRE says the intervention is to augment government effort to stem the spread of the coronavirus. Phyllis Sechijan is Assistant Commissioner of Customs Laboratory.
It is in contributing towards increasing Ghana's capabilities to test for SARS-CoV-2 infections that we are gathered here to witness the handing over of the mobile laboratory vans of the GRA Customs Laboratory. This is the result of a memorandum of understanding between the Ghana Revenue Authority, the Kumasi Center for Collaborative Research, and GIZ GmbH. Under the MOU, the GRA is providing 2 mobile laboratory vans, 2 chemists, and 2 drivers to support the operation. The GIZ is providing logistics to support the collaboration, and the KCCR is overseeing the operations and providing their experts to do the testing. It is the hope of the GRA Board, the Commissioner General, the Commissioner Customs Division, and management and staff of GRA that this joint effort would go a long way in enhancing Ghana's collective character in combating and bringing coronavirus infections under control in the country.
Nana Asensumensa reporting.
You're welcome back to the polls. Now, in the last few minutes, the Auditor General, Daniel Domilevo, has been responding to the President's directive for him to proceed on an accumulated annual leave of 123 working days. He's just released a statement responding to that directive. My colleague Emefa Apawu is here with me. She has a copy of that statement. What does he say?
Okay, so largely he's asking the president to reconsider his decision. I'll read portions of that letter that he's written to the presidency for this. He says, I write to notify you that I started my leave for the year 2020 on 1st July 2020 out of reference to the office, deference to the office of His Excellency, the President of the Republic of Ghana, and also out of the deep-seated respect I have for the office. I think it necessary, however, to bring to the attention of the high office of the president a few matters relevant to our constitutional governance, due process, and the rule of law. Now, it goes on to say that your letter to which I have referred justified the directive that I take my accumulated annual leave of 123 working days because records available to the office indicate that I have accumulated annual leave of 123 working days. Now, it says, my knowledge of recent labor law and practice in the country is that no worker is deemed to have accumulated any leave on account of their having failed, omitted, neglected, or even refused to enjoy their right to annual leave, which the law guarantees for their benefit, not the employer. Now, it says, to the best of my knowledge, therefore, where in any given year a worker fails, omits, neglects, or even refuses to take their annual leave, such leave is deemed forfeited with no corresponding obligation on the part of the employer to enforce the worker's right to take their leave by assuming, deeming, or declaring the forfeited leave accumulated. And this issue was raised by Austin Game when this issue came up first. They say, be that as it may, the directive that I proceed on leave and hand over all matters relating to the office to Mr. Johnson Ekwuamwa, with all due respect, has serious implications for the constitutional dependence of the office of the Auditor General. I have been constrained to make the point above as a result of the following main observations. It says, previous correspondence from the chairman of the Audit Service Board, who works at the office of the senior minister, together with public pronouncements by ministers, make it clear that the Auditor General's work is embarrassing the government. The office must have been aware also that several appointees of the president have not, since the year 2017, taken their annual leave to date. The direction, therefore, that I proceed on leave, oblivious of the other workers similarly circumstanced, gives the impression that the decision is not taken in good faith. Well, in the Kroll and Associates versus the Auditor General, the Supreme Court offered the lawyers 10 days from 24th June 2020 to bring their written submissions, and the Auditor General is to inspect documents or evidence of work done by the senior minister before going back to the Supreme Court. Now, it says, I consider it an honor to be of service to the state and urge that you reconsider the directive in order to protect the sanctity of the labor law, the constitution, and the dependence of the Auditor General, which is of utmost importance insofar as ensuring that the constitutional principles of probity, transparency, and accountability are concerned. Now, he tells us why he's copied the press in this letter to the presidency. He says, I have copied this letter to the press because of the press release that accompanied your letter to him as well. And since then, we've been speaking to Professor Biajiman, who is the board chairman of the Audit Service, and he told us that the board instigated the move for the Auditor General to proceed on leave because they had asked him to do so which he refused to. And so that's how come he's making reference to the board asking that he proceeds on leave, and that others in office have also accumulated their leave, yet they are in office, and questioning why this is happening to him, and asking that there should be a reconsideration of this decision by the presidency.
All right, many thanks, MFR Powell, with details of that statement issued just a while ago by Auditor General Daniel Domelevo, responding to the president's directive for him to proceed on his annual leave, which is 123 days, as he states there. And as you heard, he says that he's informed by law that every person is entitled, save in limited circumstances, to waive what the law has ordained for their benefit, and in this case, a worker's leave. And he says also that, the directive that he proceeds on leave and hands over everything relating to the office to Mr. Johnson Ekuamwa, with all due respect, has serious implications for the constitutional independence of the Office of the Auditor General. All right, so let's go on the line and get the perspective of an anti-graft agent, Edem Senanu. He joins us on the line. Hello, good afternoon to you.
And good afternoon to you.
I'm sure you've heard the Auditor General's response to the President's directive. What are your initial reactions?
Well, I think that the Auditor General has held himself up with a lot of integrity. He indicates that it is out of respect for the office of the President. It is clearly indicated that he feels that the presidency has made a mistake, which is aligned with what most of us thought. Because you set a very dangerous precedent when we start having the executive being able to instruct independent institutions of state and asking their heads to go on leave, etc. Just making an example of the Electoral Commission, if the Electoral Commissioner was asked to proceed on leave at this time, that would be serious. So I'm not too surprised at his comments. I'm quite surprised that nobody paid attention to the specifics of the law, which allows him either to reschedule with permission, to accumulate not exceeding 2 years, which could not be more than 60 days, and that would be with written approval. And he also has the right to forfeit it. So if he says, I'm not really interested, I wanted to serve the country, it boggles many of us our minds why we should get ourselves to this point. So I think that he's done the right thing so that we don't have an unnecessary agitation between the auditor and the presidency. But we are hoping that the presidency will take a good look at this and understand the issues.
Now, he's also making the point that the directive for him to proceed on leave and hand over matters to the matters relating to the office to Mr. Johnson Ekuamwa has serious implications for the constitutional independence of the Office of the Auditor General. What constitutional issues does it raise?
Yes, because the spirit of the Constitution is that these independent institutions should not come under the influence or manipulation of the executive. Indeed, one of the things that this particular scenario highlights is the fact that we need to do much more in terms of protecting and guarding the independence of such institutions. Because as we are all aware, the Auditor General has come in head on with many of the appointees of the executive in recent years. What it means is there's that tension, and if the executive can now decide that he should just proceed on leave and therefore they have influence there, we will not see the end of those investigations. We will not see that the right type of prosecutions and sanctions are being proffered to people who, as it were, have taken from the public purse. So he's absolutely right that it has implications for independent institutions under the Constitution, to the extent that the executive can now begin to say, you've not taken leave. And we know that many of them have not taken leave. I have been asking that we want to know the outstanding leave for the president, the vice president, the electoral commissioner, the head of the NCCE, head of CHARGE. Let's see what is happening. I am sure that we are going to find that it will appear as if this is a targeted action, and that's not good.
Right. And I know that many of your colleagues within the anti-graft, arena have been meeting on this matter. All the anti-corruption agencies have been meeting on this matter because they've been, deeply worried about this. What has become of, what was the outcome of that meeting? What have you resolved?
Well, we've had one or two meetings. The intention is that by the middle of next week, probably Tuesday, if not earlier, we'll have a press conference. And in fact, the letter from the Auditor General almost mirrors our thinking on the issue, because we've looked at the Human Resource Manual for the Public Service, we've looked at the laws, Act 651, etc., and international best practice on it, and they all point in the same direction. It would be in our own interest if the presidency deals with it before we start making press statements, etc., because we don't want in a political season to seem as if we are going against the government. But this particular decision does not sit well for good governance in this country. As a precedent, it would just destroy and undermine our fight against corruption and the independence of such institutions. So we will be speaking about this as early as Tuesday collectively, so that people understand that it's not one group or one person who has drawn this conclusion. So essentially, the Auditor General is asking the president to reconsider this directive and have him back at work. Is that a call that the agencies, all the anti-graft agencies, are backing? The theme is going to be bring back the Auditor General. That's going to be the overriding issue, bring back the Auditor General. Because otherwise, you set a precedent that spells a lot of trouble for all of us. So bring back the Auditor General. All right. Thank you so much for your time. That's Edem Senanu. He speaks for the citizen movement against corruption there. And he's been speaking to the statement released by the Auditor General, in which he is responding to the president on that directive to proceed on a 123-day leave. And he's asking the president to reconsider that directive. Government says the lack of money has held back the implementation of the Right to Information law. The law, first mooted in 1999, was passed and signed into law last year, with implementation expected to kick in this year. But Selassie Spencer, technical officer from the Ministry of Information, which has been leading efforts to have the law take effect, has been telling journalists in Accra today that raising money has been a challenge.
Last year, when the act was passed into law, the Ministry of Information set up an implementation secretariat to oversee the entire implementation process. The secretariat then began working on an implementation roadmap, where afterwards we met with CSO, some CSO players, we met with UNESCO, we met with some other stakeholders to deliberate on this implementation roadmap, which we, at the end of the day, adopted and decided to work with. However, again, the reality was we had a plan, but then the lack of funding more or less affected a great part of this implementation process. So as a ministry, what we decided to do was to revise the plan and to have the activities within the plan segregated into two categories. One was to begin to take on activities that did not require so much funding, and then defer the other part of the implementation processes that required heavy funding into this year, when some money could be made available.
Well, we've been speaking to some journalists on what they feel about this. Watch.
I have been part of this process. I've been following for a while, and I think it has delayed too much. Because every day they keep telling us, okay, this is the time we are going to implement it. I remember somewhere last year, they said this year, early January, they are going to start the implementation. And now I come here and the Ministry of Information rep is telling us it was due to funding and there are they need to have some trainings done. And I'm like, who is supposed to provide the funding in the first place? And if you know you don't have the funding, then why do you promise us that you're going to start the implementation this year? So for me, I think it's, kind of a deliberate attempt just to hold the process and, and to ensure that we don't get to implement it. Because this thing is really for journalists. A lot of journalists were happy when it was passed because we thought, it is going to help us get information easily. But with the delays and especially the funding aspect, I think it's a deliberate process. And
I can see that certain things have been put in place for the smooth implementation, but I don't think implementation has started. Because for me, I feel that when you say implementation has started, it means that I can easily walk to a government institution and I'll get the information I need. If not, refer to another institution where they have that information that I need. So based on the information that the government official is giving us now, they are still training people, they are still orienting or sensitizing officers. So I think they've started plans to implement, but implementation hasn't started for me. Yeah.
Well, after it was passed, we all remember that the president assented to it, but then we were told that early this year we were going to see the implementation. Now, as at now, we are in July, and it appears that the process has slowed. Though we are being told that there are other things, sensitization and the engagement of some public institutions and all that. The question is, we've delayed, and that is what we were told. We were told that from January 2020 we're going to see an implementation. So even though some engagements are ongoing and all that, the question is, has there been an explanation to the citizenry and all of us as to what process or what stage we've got into? And I think to that end we've not been forthcoming, and the implementation for me hasn't been that good.
Let's do some politics now. And some youth of the governing New Patriotic Party in the Kumewu constituency of the Ashanti region are threatening to vote against the incumbent Member of Parliament, Philip Atta Baswa, for failing to develop the area. Mohammed Nuruddin reports.
District. The person can answer, but to skirt and blouse. Skirt and blouse. Do a baby, I bet to a man. Or so, you bet to a so penny, but no banner dear.
Residents of Kumewu Bodumasi in the Ashanti region say their Member of Parliament, Philip Atta Baswa, has failed to solve the many challenges he promised to fix when he was campaigning for their vote.
Secretary Kumewu has given Philip Atta Baswa 16 good years for development, 8 years for DC, 8 years for MP. But still, developmental project is stable at Kumewu. Those delegates that voted for Philip Atta Baswa, they are 180 delegates. They receive payment every month from Philip Atta Baswa. In Secretary Kumewu, if you are not a delegate or a family of the delegate, you cannot get any work or any youth employment work. This has made Secretary Kumewu stabilize in developmental projects.
Poor drainage system and provision of school blocks are what they claim the Member of Parliament has failed to fix.
They say Yabreno, Oba Bodmasia, you private school honomo. They say Oba is say a school and our school honomo and Krangas saw them in the Shiadi. You were MP, you who and I'm be a to a family.
Timmy near Juma. Say
Ye fa police, ye fa soja, me mu awie school bodumase a, omu ne adwuma omo ye. Ento bra ye nya adwuma nye, ye ma wie school. Wo ba wie pole, atua school fees so obeto aduane am wadi na fe wasa dan otoso ma wo na wo hwe no. Osole ote dem.
The residents have threatened to vote skirt and blouse in the December elections.
After our survey, about 87% people in Sechere Kumau are fighting for skirt and blouse.
Philip Atta Bazua was re-elected to represent the MPP in the upcoming elections. A report by Mahmoud Mohamed Nuruddin.
Now, the rank and file of the MPP in the Western region, including the regional minister, Dr. Kwabena Otre-Darko Mensah, are yet to come to terms with the death of the former mayor of Sekondi Takoradi, Anthony Kwabena Kranche Sam. The former mayor, described by the regional executives as a pivot to their victory in 2016 national and regional, gave up the battle against COVID-19 at the University of Ghana Hospital, where he had been on admission for some days. His death was confirmed by the president in his 11th address to the nation. Earlier today, at the Lady Star of the Sea Cathedral in Takoradi, Honorable KK Sam, who is a staunch Catholic, brought together mourners from all walks of life and the political divide as a requiem mass was held in his honor.
He's been working hard on this particular assignment. Last year, I think the budget for this particular thing was approved in Parliament.
We are in a mourning mood. I think that it's unfortunate. In fact, I was asking my colleagues whether he was still dead. I don't believe he's dead. Maybe I still have to see the body to be sure. Because it happened so fast. It happened so fast because even on that test, they had spoken to him. We are in a very difficult situation now in the whole country, and we all have to be careful, extremely careful. If you look at the statistics that are coming up, and more people dying from the disease, you realize that it's no respect of person. So we all have to be careful. Our protocols and we have to observe the protocols. What I'm realizing is that a lot of people are not using the mask well. A lot of people are only using the face shield without mask, nose mask. It's not proper. People put on the mask and they bring it below their nose. Meanwhile, your nose is also taking in some of the air. So I believe that we need to be careful. We've been told that 60 years and above are more in danger. I believe that they should start staying indoors more often. For me, I see it as a proof of Darwin theory of natural selection, survival of the fittest. So if you have comorbidity, you have to protect yourself better. If you are older, 60 years and above, you have to protect yourself better. I believe that if you are able to observe these protocols, washing of hands and running water with soap, social distancing and the rest, we should be fine. But it seems that that's not the message that we are carrying out there.
Honorable KK Sam was the former regional secretary. Prior to that, he was the constituency secretary for the New Patriotic Party in Sekondi. He's worked extensively for the party, and we all knew he's been with us in the opposition, power, and when we came to power. So he was also a teacher within the metropolis, so a lot of people have engaged with him. We know him for his humility, what he's done for the party, so as you can tell, there are a lot of people here, even though within the church premises, we only had about 100 people observing those protocols. But then, we also, in the run-up to his death, also what he was actually doing in the help towards the fight against COVID-19. So we are actually shocked and touched by his death, and we believe that as a party we need to work harder so that the work that he did for us doesn't go to waste.
The Ghana Coalition of NGOs in Health is calling on the Ghana Health Service to establish a national control program on coronavirus. According to the coalition, their data suggests the need to ensure equity and access in the testing and support services. They also claim that parts of the country do not still have the basic logistics to properly manage situations of community spread of the COVID-19. Dr. Gabriel Benako is national chairman of the group, and he joins us on the phone. We'll get to the strategies that you're recommending, but what's the rationale for this national control program on coronavirus that you're suggesting? Because we have, some would say we have the Noguchi Institute, we have the Kumasi Center for Collaborative Research, which is doing a great job on data collection and testing. So won't we be duplicating efforts?
Yeah, thank you very much. As we have always recommended to government, it is only in the good interest of Ghanaians and also for government to respond to their oath that they sworn to protect everybody and ensure equity in the country. You cannot use Kolebu, Legon Medical Center, Noguchi, and KCCR alone to measure your commitment to protecting every Ghanaian. You have to decentralize. And because we already have an updated Local Government Act 2012, 16, you are supposed to roll out programs and intentions across the country. What we do know is that in public health sense, when there's an outbreak or a pandemic, and it is declared, you need to decentralize the containment. That we think it is high time the Ghana Health Service roll out a decentralized control program. We cannot stop the virus now. It's already community spread. It has gained root. The National Task Force now cannot do better than what they have done. The only thing is that we need to train people, orient people, institutionalize it so that people can go willingly to every health facility to test for their status, and then we can be able to manage and control the community spread. That is the philosophy. And Ghana Health Service must do this to create the national control program, as we have always done. Don't forget that we have several of coronavirus. We have N1, we have the SARS, and now the novel. All these things, government can put all of them together and create a control program so that we can have a very good national program to put in place offices and human resource to manage it down, the piecemeal that we have done. The National Task Force is already exhausted now, and all that you need to do is to get new teams to establish in all the district regions and at the national level.
And is it the case that this is not already being done?
No, it is not there. What we have is a national task force. Yeah. A task force is not an institution. It is a quasi ad hoc response mechanism. But we cannot stop the coronavirus now. We have to institutionalize it. So we need to create an office, we need to empower the office, and we need to support the office to support Ghanaians to be able to do it.
So have you made this call to the Ghana Health Service, and what has been their response?
We are waiting for their response, but we already have met them. Today, 75 NGOs of our members have met the Ghana Health Service across the country in 3 zones. 25 in Northern region zone, 25 in the Middle zone, and 25 in the Southern zone. And all that we are saying is that they need to institutionalize the COVID-19 program so that we can all support the community mobilization, community education, anti-stigma reduction, and referral to health facilities, so that is the best way we can be able to manage COVID-19.
What impact are you hoping such a program, national control program on coronavirus, will have if the ministry or government intends to take it up?
Let one typical example. When the president announced and asked everybody to come on board to contribute to the fight against the COVID-19, I'm sure you saw how both public and private sectors poured in resources, materials, logistics, and money into the fund. So will it be if the government announced the National Control Program? We are going to have corporate bodies, we are going to have more development partners to support the district and regional programs so that it can be much more institutionalized and it can be more contextual and practical than what we are seeing now.
How would you respond to those who argue that, you know, this is not really necessary because, again, we have the existing institutions to deal with the issues that you have raised already, but that, is it the case that if any new or novel virus comes up, we're going to set up a national program to deal with it?
My sister, the novel coronavirus is similar to the HIV. We have national control program for HIV and AIDS. We have national control program for TB. We have national control program for malaria. So what prevents the government of Ghana to have a control program for coronavirus and other influenzas so that we can have much more funding and much more institutions to deal with it so that we can hold them much more responsible.
All right, many thanks for your time. That's Dr. Gabriel Benaku. He is head of the Ghana Coalition of NGOs in Health. And as you heard him there, he is calling on the Ghana Health Service to establish what he calls a national program, control program on coronavirus. Now, Deputy Roads and Highways Minister Anthony Carbo says government has not abandoned its 2020 Year of Roads agenda despite the impact of the coronavirus pandemic. He says roads in the new 6 regions are also being constructed. He spoke during the signing of an 872 million Japanese yen grant for the provision of medical equipment in response to the fight against COVID-19. Improvement of infrastructure to alleviate traffic congestion at the Tema motorway roundabout, and provision of scholarship for human resource development.
It is the entire government is focusing on roads this year, and that's exactly what we are doing. There's no abandonment of the Year of Roads because of COVID or anything like that. The President commissioned the Tema interchange whilst we're still in the COVID restrictions. You can tell you the President is doing so much, and the Minister has been on the tour of the entire country. Everywhere that critical projects are currently ongoing, contractors are on site, contractors have been paid, no contractor has left site. Clearly tells you that the program that we had, and what was the program? People ask, what was your program really? We knew that we have over 78,000 roads in this country. We cannot construct all those roads at the same time. What the minister did, with the support of the president, was to ensure that we prioritized the key roads. What are these key roads? There are major roads that are economic roads. The multiply effect of constructing those roads will engender economic development in those communities. We took that into account. We also looked at major political roads, roads that people have yearned for. The president has made commitments as he was a candidate. These are roads that we've taken into account. Then also we have projects, for instance, that the new regions, created of new regions, there are important projects that must go to beautify those regions. Internal roads, access roads, and also trunk roads, feeder roads, urban roads in the new regions are also being dealt with head on.
Also at that ceremony was Deputy Foreign Affairs Minister Charles Oredu, who says the Japanese government is helping Ghana to construct a bridge over the Volta River.
Japan is supporting Ghana in the construction of a new bridge across the Volta River on the Eastern Corridor, among other ongoing projects in the country. It is my hope that the projects, when completed, will ensure safe, efficient road transportation and contribute to the efficient flow of goods and services. Ladies and gentlemen, with the advent of the COVID-19 pandemic, governments around the world, including Ghana, have taken various measures in resourcing their health sectors aimed at containing and stemming the spread of the virus and its related devastating effects. As you know, the government of Ghana is gradually easing the COVID-19 restrictions for normal life to resume. The resumption of domestic flights, return to universities and schools of final year students, and the upward adjustment of the number of persons for public gatherings are a few examples. Obviously, the decision of the Japanese government to support Ghana with medical equipment and supplies is timely regarding the increasing numbers of COVID-19 cases recorded in the country. This grant aid would augment the efforts of the government of Ghana in further strengthening the country's health sector in the fight against the pandemic and other diseases. On behalf of the government and the people of Ghana, and in my own name, I wish to express our sincere gratitude to the government and people of Japan for their unyielding support for Ghana's socio-economic development.
Now let's go to the Ashanti region, specifically Kumasi, because commuters are stranded at the Kumasi depot of the Metro Mass Transit as workers embark on a sit-down strike. The workers, mainly drivers and mechanics, are calling for the head of the managing director, Albert Edubuahene, for what they allege as collapsing the government agencies. The aggrieved workers complain of non-payment of salaries for over 6 months. Over 100 buses are grounded at the Metro Mass Yard with minor faults, which the mechanics say few CDs will bring the buses back on the streets. But they say that gross mismanagement has brought the giant mass transit firm to its knees. They say they won't resume work until government hears their plea. We're joined via Zoom by my colleague Asenso, who is on the ground, who has been monitoring this issue since morning. Asenso, what's the situation now?
The situation is still the same. The workers, the aggrieved workers, so to speak, are still on strike. They say they are not returning to their positions until their demands are met. What they are demanding is simple. They are all singing the same song. They say the 2.5 salary arrears must be paid to them, and then for that, they'll return to their normal positions. But until then, they are not going back to work.
And what has the management of the company been saying or responding to the concerns of the workers?
The workers are saying that, first of all, they have a list of concerns, but on the top of their priority list, they're saying that, first of all, they want the arrears to be settled. 2, they also want management to ensure that all the grounded buses must be repaired to ensure that they have enough bus to, run the system, because they were comparing the system to previous years, that somewhere last 2 years to last 3 years, they had like 10 to 15 buses which were running from Kumasi to Sunyane. But as it stands for now, they have like 5 buses for Kumasi to Sunyane. They also had like, let's say 20 buses that were running from Kumasi to Obuasi. But for now, all the buses are grounded because of minor faults, which they are saying that our management attitude towards maintenance culture is very poor. So somehow they are calling for management head, and also, most importantly, their terms of conditions must also be settled. So that is what they are saying. Their concerns are simple. They want their monies to be paid to them, and also they want the buses that are grounded to be repaired so that they have at least good buses on the road to ensure that the system is okay to meet the high demand and also the competition that is on the road.
Right, Asenso, I was asking whether the management has responded to the concerns raised by the workers at all.
By the time we were leaving the yard around after midday, we tried approaching the management to find out if they will be able to meet the aggrieved workers' demand. But the manager of the Kumasi depot, Nicholas Odro, told us that he is not in a position to comment on the situation, and then he's holding on until further notice. But for now, he declined any comment for now,
And very quickly, Asen, I know that earlier you mentioned that commuters were stranded, but paint a picture for us about the impact of this strike, because I know that the Metro Mass is one of the popular modes of transport in Kumasi.
Exactly, most of the people who commute from Kumasi to the hinterlands really and heavily rely on the Metro Mass because, 1, they believe it's safe, 2, it's cheap. So people, especially market women and traders, would like to, transport their goods, especially perishable goods. So when we got to the yard, we saw perishable goods, lots of fruits and vegetables lying bare on the floor at the mercy of the scorching sun. And then, so these owners of these perishable goods were frustrated. And then also, we also approached some of the commuters who came to the yard as early as 5:30 a.m. to catch the first bus. Speaking with them, they told me that they are very disappointed because they didn't know that the workers will be on sit-down strike. So they had to resort to minibuses like Trotro and Sprinter and other buses, which I spoke to one commuter who told me that these Sprinter buses actually killed his brother, so he doesn't feel safe sitting in the Sprinter bus on that long journey. So most of the commuters I encountered were quite frustrated and also disappointed. Araba.
Nana Minister, thank you for that update from Kumasi there, and we will be keeping our eyes on that situation and bringing you the latest on it. But that's how we wrap up our polls for today. Thank you for watching. My name is Araba Kumsin, sitting in for your regular host, Gifty Ando Apia, who is home isolating and enjoying every bit of it. Thank you to my production crew led by Nancy Emefadradosi and the whole team. Enjoy your weekend. Up next is LTS. And of course, you can get more information on My Joy Online. Log on to My Joy Online for more news.